Good evening. It's Halloween, October 31st, 2023, and we're going live here on Mi Gente on air tonight to celebrate not Halloween, but actually Dia de los Muertos. So please come in the room if you've got questions or you want to make a comment. It would be really helpful tonight because we are in the midst of October 31st being Halloween. But I want to talk more about Dia de los Muertos and our cultural heritage significance of that here in the Great Lakes Bay region. So join me tonight here on Mi Gente on Air.
Welcome to Mi Gente on Air on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online WSGW.com. Now, here is your host, Larry Rodarte.
Good evening. Welcome to Mi Gente on Air. I am your host, Larry Rodarte, and it's Halloween, October 31st, 2023, and the weather is not cooperating again. The temperature really dropped today to like 40, 49 degrees, and as I was driving into the studio, it started raining, and that rain turned to snow, and it's like really cold for the young ones to be trick or treating. But do we actually even trick or treat anymore? Because what has become the norm, I think, as opposed to say 30 years ago or when I was a kid, is the trunk or treats that I've seen at different organizations. And I know that the Union Civica, we had a beautiful one this Saturday, lots and lots of kids. We had about 25 cars that participated. So, that has kind of become the norm for safety reasons, obviously, for the kids. But if anybody's still going out there, I'm sure there are trick or treaters. Do you remember that term, trick or treaters? And they're out there this evening for Halloween. But I wanted to dedicate this show more towards Dia de los Muertos and the celebrations that are coming up in the community at different organizations. And it just seems that more and more people are really celebrating the Mexican holiday. And so, it's become more apparent that this is something that people are connecting to with their heritage and their culture. And I want to mention that, Dia de los Muertos, really um, has evolved through the United States in the last, I'd say, 20 years. Although it's been such a holiday that has been celebrated for many, many years in Mexico and centuries, actually, because um, it's connected into the Christian holidays of All Saints Days and All Souls Day. And we know that way, way back, it was a meshing of the Christianity with the indigenous Indians. And I've mentioned that before on this program. Um, and so, it's something that I want to mention has evolved in our area. And what I mean by that is, I would say 20 years ago, you didn't hear too much about Dia de los Muertos. And I can tell you that um, I want to go back like 1945. 1945 was a year that was pivotal for Mexicans and Mexican Americans in the Saginaw region. And that was because a group of men came together with the idea of forming a civic organization that was going to help not only in civil rights, but they wanted to form this organization called the Patriotic Committee. That's what it was actually called first in 1944, and then it became the Union Civica the then following year, 1945. And part of the reason was because they felt that as they assimilated into American culture here in Saginaw, they were their young people, especially, were forgetting their cultures. They were getting away from the language of Spanish. They were getting away from the traditions that these parents in 1945 were familiar with their parents from Mexico, predominantly Mexico or Texans. And so they felt like I said, the language was being forgotten, the traditions, and you got to remember when they came, a lot of the immigrants to the Saginaw area from Mexico, The first ward was the area where they were living predominantly because of the gray iron foundry. Many found jobs once they were no longer working in the field. They were offered the jobs at General Motors at the gray iron, and this was their way of staying in the area and making an income. And so what they did was they lived predominantly in the first ward area, and they had St. Joseph Catholic Church on 6th Street as their main church. And of course, those that were from Mexico, Catholicism was predominantly the religion in those days. Not for everybody, but that's who the Mexican people really, they really practice Catholicism. And so St. Joe's Catholic Church in the First Ward was the hub. And in 1928, when a group of women from the church said to Monsignor Bolton, we have to come up with an organization that is going to, help us as women learn how to not only cook and do women things, but also to celebrate and their faith. And that was through the inception of the Damas de Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe organization, where they celebrated everything to do with the mother of Jesus Christ. And so Monsignor Bolton said yes, when previously they wouldn't allow any this was a Polish Irish church, and they wouldn't really allow any of the Mexican traditions. But as the population really increased in the area, they finally said yes. Monsignor Bolton was a man ahead of his time, and he made changes within the church, within St. Joseph Catholic Church. And so, I just set that up as a preface to saying that, these Mexican trailblazers that came in and said, you know what, we need to somehow hang on to our culture and heritage. They kind of set that up with the, forming the Unión Cívica Mexicana. And so in 2007, I took a trip to Mexico, and I was really blown away by what I saw there in Morelia, Michoacan. And that was how that town celebrated Dia de los Muertos. And this is before the movie Coco, and this is before Dia de los Muertos really became, a topic in our area. And I was married at the time, and I had a mother-in-law who really celebrated that Mexican holiday because she was from Irapuan, Mexico, and she rarely got to see her family. Being married in her and her husband came to America, and he worked in the foundry as well, and they lived in Munger, Michigan. And every year for Dia de los Muertos, she would set up this beautiful altar with all her deceased loved ones. And she typically had pan de muerto, and she had tamales on the ofrenda, and she would make some of her mother's favorite foods, or whoever the deceased one that she was celebrating the life of. She would put on this beautiful altar, and it was always in the living room. And whenever you walked in the house, that's what you would see. And so, it was really something for me to witness that, and then go to Mexico and witness how beautiful they celebrated it in Morelia and Pátzcuaro, as well as Irapuan and Inicio. They celebrated it in a big way with Los Viejitos, the old men, in the dance that you would see traditionally in celebration. And I even went to my ancestral home where my great grandma Cecilia was from. And I mentioned her a lot on this program, but it was a town called Guandacarrillo, Michoacan. And man, they had a beautiful stage in the center of the plaza, and they had it all decorated with the marigolds and the costumes. And they came out and they did a beautiful dance where all the participants were dressed as people during the Mexican Revolution, and they played out the whole scene of when the town was liberated from when the Mexican Revolution, and they were fighting the government. And it just was a beautiful scene, and they were dressed in calavera faces, and I was really touched by that. And so when I came back to Saginaw, and I was involved with the Union Civica I just started, we needed a way to raise some money and raise it quick. And so I said, why don't we have a Dia de los Muertos brunch? And they all just looked at me, and they smiled. And those that really didn't even know what it was, they said, what is that? And, so I had to explain kind of what I knew. And at that time, I didn't know as much as I do today. But we had our first annual Dia de los Muertos brunch in 2008. And it was funny because we raised a lot of money really fast. we had a good response. And what we connected that with was, of course, what I connect most of our events at the Civica is food. And we made these delicious meals, and we had a brunch, and the people came in and they paid $10 and they got a full meal, as well as they were able to look at the different ofrendas that we had around the Civica Hall. And, so it's really nice to see today where, I do give credit to Disney because they did that movie Coco. And it just seemed to really skyrocket in terms of the popularity after the movie. But it was really nice to see this year, and I maybe started last year, but this year, where there was really an interest, not only within the Mexican people, but non-Hispanics. When we had last year, the 13th annual celebration at the Civica, we had a lot of non-Hispanics that came in and wanted to be educated. And I think that was fueled by many of the younger kids that had seen the movie Coco and they wanted to experience Dia de los Muertos, um, event, as well as I'm sure that some of them probably said to their parents, why don't we have an ofrenda? Why don't we have an altar in our home to grandma and grandpa or what have you? And so it's just one of those cultural awareness events that we have celebrated and we bring to the Great Lakes Bay region, the community at large, because not only is this happening in Saginaw, but it's happening nationwide. And on Facebook, you're seeing a lot of celebrations locally as well as out in California and Texas. It's like everybody's doing a Dia de los Muertos festival or Day of the Dead party. And it's really kind of refreshing to see that it's one of these really beautiful events celebrated in the Mexican culture with a lot of passion. And I think it's really important that we talk a little bit about what exactly um, this holiday is representing and how it should be celebrated because I do see sometimes it's getting out of hand. I saw a picture of Mark Consuelo and his wife Kelly Ripa, who had donned a beautiful outfit for Dia de los Muertos, their clothing and all, and their calavera faces and all, and that was their Halloween outfit. And this was on Facebook just yesterday and today, and I'm thinking, man, it's kind of really doing a disservice in terms of associating it with Halloween because, as we know, it's nothing like Halloween in terms of how America celebrates Halloween today. It may not have been celebrated that way 200 years ago when they first brought Halloween by the settlers way back, but today definitely there's a horror, a scary part to the Halloween tradition that Dia de los Muertos is not associated with. It shouldn't be in any way scary to anybody. And so we'll talk about that as well today. But I really wanted to get that out in terms of why the Union Civica Mexicana today is celebrating. We're going on our 14th anniversary of when we started, and actually would be the 16th. But I think for 2 years we didn't do it because of COVID. But it's a beautiful event. We have the different families that come in that put up ofrendas, some who have a love for a long history and tradition of their culture. And then we also have those who have recently lost somebody, and it's a way of grieving and a way of going through the process of grief of losing someone so soon. And I want to mention that this weekend, I lost another relative to an accident. He passed away at the age of 36, my cousin Joseph Diaz. And he really was loved by the family in terms of him being the youngest grandson of great grandma Cecilia and grandpa Sinovio. Of grandchildren that they had was about 70, and he was the youngest of all of them. And unfortunately, we lost him to an accident. And it's really a shame because it makes you really realize your own mortality, but also that life is just too short. Life is just too short. And it doesn't matter if you're in your 90s or your 80s. There can be a 36-year-old who will just pass away with no notice. And so, I know cousin Joe, I called him Primo. He would often come and he wanted me to make pozole for him, the Mexican soups that was handed down by my great grandma Cecilia from Juan de Carrillo, Michoacan. and he enjoyed it. He just enjoyed the cooking, the Mexican traditions, and he just loved family. Whenever you saw little Joe, he was always willing to hug you and just relish in the idea that he was the youngest of the grandchildren of his grandparents, and so he loved all his cousins, and everybody was so much older than him, but the next generation was more he was more their age. But whenever you left him, he always it wasn't goodbye or anything. He's just I love you, primo. I love you, prima, and that's just how Joe was. He just had a lot of love, and I know that he lost his mother last year and his father 10 years before that, and he felt, like anybody who misses their parents, a real loss. And I know we talked about that often, and I can't believe that he's gone now. Just less than, well, I think a year since his mother passed. So hopefully they're all together wherever they are. And I just want to mention that. And I will do a nice ofrenda for Joe this 14th season of the Dia de los Muertos celebration at the Union Civica. And so I want to invite everybody out to come out to our event. We're going to have food trucks out there. We're going to have the ofrendas. We're going to have Johnny Martinez coming out and sculpting some probably, I'm not sure, but Calavera faces maybe from the Marshall Fredericks Museum. They're coming in painting for his artistic work, as well as we have a painting by John Vasquez, who's been doing some beautiful murals around the Saginaw area recently. And he's got a beautiful Dia de los Muertos painting that he did, and that is going to be on sale on Saturday's event, and the proceeds will go to the CAN Council, for abused children in our area. And so there's a lot of activity. There's going to be a lot of activity, and I want to invite everybody out. And I know that like Delta College, the Soul Group, the Society of Hispanic Leaders at Delta College, they're having their event for Dia de los Muertos on November 2nd, which is Thursday. I know that the Saginaw Art Museum is also doing a Dia de los Muertos celebration the same time the Civicas is on Saturday, and they're going to have Maria's Fruit food truck out there. And Carlton high school kids are doing ofrendas under the direction of Roxanne Chantaka. They're going to be at the Saginaw Art Museum with their versions of ofrendas, and so you're seeing a real incorporation of Dia de los Muertos into these young lives who are celebrating this culturally, and really enjoying the meaning of it, as well as putting together ofrendas and realizing what it actually entails and what it means. And I'm sure teacher Roxanne Chantaka is doing a great job with that. And so, if anybody's got any questions or concerns, in regards to all this, I'm sure there are people that fully don't understand exactly what Dia de los Muertos means. And, it's kind of strange. It means in English, Day of the Dead. And so right away, our minds sometimes will, associate it with the program. What's the program, Jonathan? On Netflix, not Day of the Dead, but
The Walking Dead?
The Walking Dead. You think of that right away, and the zombies um, and it's nothing like that at all. It's really a celebration of life, and it's celebrating that continuous life that we have, even though we may be gone from this earth. We're also going on to our eternal life, wherever that may be, in heaven. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I'm hopeful that we will see our loved ones, and that's what the indigenous Indians, were very faithful on in regard to Dia de los Muertos and how they celebrated, because they really believed their spirits of their loved ones would come home and visit during this time. And then that was meshed with the Christianity of All Saints Day and All Souls Day. And so they would put out their favorite foods, their favorite drink, their favorite bread, and then pan de muerto became a symbol of Dia de los Muertos, and the bakeries would make these beautiful artistic breads that you would see on the altars as well. And so there's just a lot of faith, a lot of heritage, a lot of cultural aspects to this day that can be really celebrated with passion and just a lot of color, and of course that color being yellow and orange with the marigolds that are part of many of the harvest flowers during this time period in Mexico. And you don't have to, like in our area, we don't typically have marigolds at this point in time, but the fall colors has kind of been replaced, in terms of that. But I know that Amazon does sell a lot of marigolds. I'm putting a push in for Amazon, but I just recently purchased a bunch of marigold, artificial silk marigold flowers, so that we can have them on the ofrendas that we will have at the Civica this weekend. And it's been a really learning process, since 2008 when we started, where we have different families who have traditionally been a part of it, and we've all kind of learned together. We've all really made a point to try to uh, do the tradition in a way that is celebrated in Mexico and not deviate too far away from it and let it become an Americanized type of Dia de los Muertos. Although, because we are here, that's the way things usually go, just like Cinco de Mayo. But sometimes it's unconscionable, and it's real important to try to stick to the ideas of why they're celebrating Dia de los Muertos. And it's a solemn event, really. It is a celebration, and there is music, and there is sometimes a wider event of celebration that typically is shown in Mexico, because if you go to Mexico, it's across the board. You will have some individuals in parades, all donned up in costumes of calaveras, typically in old clothing, like from the turn of the century. And I'm talking about the 18th century to the 19th century. Um, but you also will have those who are very prayerful, and they're at the cemeteries, at the churches where their loved ones and ancestors are buried, and they really decorate beautifully the cemeteries and the grave sites of their loved ones. And it's just really beautiful with candlelight and a prayerful attitude that they have. And it's really meaningful to those individuals. And I've seen typically where the young people, they may not typically understand or want to celebrate it that way. They want to be at a parade, or they want to be at a celebration where they're not understanding the true meaning of Dia de los Muertos or the Calavera faces. And so, I think that's what's kind of happening here now in America as well. And everybody is celebrating in their own way, and that's fine. And I've seen comments where people say, do I have to be Mexican in order to or Hispanic in order to celebrate Dia de los Muertos? And absolutely not. You can be whoever you are, and if it helps in celebrating your loved ones, then go for it. Make an ofrenda in your house. That's an awareness that we're bringing, and saying, yes, you can celebrate your loved ones in this way if it helps in the grieving process. If you just want to be culturally different and you want to put up an ofrenda, then by all means, go ahead. It's a wonderful tradition. And I came from my niece's house. She's 30 years old, around there, and she had up an ofrenda, and I was really surprised. I said, "You put up an ofrenda?" And questioning her, she goes, "Yeah." So I know this is becoming a huge movement around the area, celebrated. Um, and as the Hispanic culture continues to grow in America, it's only going to get bigger and better. And that's where we are today. And so, as we celebrate on November 4th, it's Saturday at the Unión Cívica Mexicana. That's the Saturday after the actual days are celebrated on November 1st and November 2nd. But that was the closest Saturday we could get to Dia de los Muertos, the actual days, because this last Saturday we had a big Halloween party there. So, it's so close. Those two kind of celebrations and holidays are so close. I think that's why a lot of people get them confused in what they mean. So when we come out of break, we're going to talk a little bit about the meanings with Dia de los Muertos, and try to get a more clear definition of why and how the celebration is celebrated. So stay with me and come back, and we'll talk more. And if you've got questions or answers that are questions and concerns that you want to put in the room, we can read them out to the audience. So stay with me as we go into commercial now, and we celebrate as Dia de los Muertos in the Great Lakes Bay region. We'll be right back. Hey, we're back here streaming on Facebook Live, and I see a number of different comments. Thank you for the condolences from those of you who are giving those, and thank you for the comments here I'm seeing. Really, I want to talk about Dia de los Muertos because it has become so popular in the area, and I think wherever you are, you probably see that on your Facebook accounts. I don't know if it's because we're putting on a Dia de los Muertos event at the Civica, but like on my feeds, that's all I'm seeing now. And so, different events and stuff. And so it's really becoming popular. So, cousin David, I see you on here, William Flores, Jessica Gomez. Let me know if what you're seeing is what I'm seeing as well in the popularity of Dia de los Muertos, where you are at. I know, David, you're in California, so it must be huge out there. But we're going to go back into the show and talk more. Oh, but I wanted to tell my producer I need a break. I just been talking. When I don't have a guest on the show, it's like, man, I don't realize how fast the show goes and how much I have to actually talk to keep the show going. So I'm going to incorporate my producer Jonathan Dent in this next segment. So I hope he's ready because I know he's always ready, and he's on different programs and different shows. From Cream Bowman's United Shades of Grey to the Art Lewis Show, and he does give his opinion. So it's good to have that perspective as well. So help me to finish out this next show, the next 24 minutes, and we'll go back into Mi Gente on Air.
This is Mi Gente on Air on WSGW.
Welcome back, my people. Mi Gente on Air. We are almost at the 3-year mark of this show next month, November 15th. Well, that's in 2 weeks, actually. We will celebrate 3 years of Mi Gente on Air. And because I'm the only guest here today on my show, I'm losing my voice from talking so much. But I do have my producer, Jonathan Denton. Many of you are familiar with him. And I'm going to incorporate him and his perspective of being non-Latino into the show, because I think that's the awareness of Dia de los Muertos, this day, this celebration that Mexico has, that is an actual national holiday, and now is coming over to America, in a big way. It's good to see that perspective. So, Jonathan, what do you think about all of this and what you are seeing from your perspective?
I definitely think it's interesting. Like prior to working on Mi Gente on Air, my only familiarity with Dia de los Muertos was from pop culture references. So it was very little. Like calaveras, obviously, are probably the most visible part of it. But like the idea of an ofrenda, um, I- I'm curious because I kind of have a thought or a theory. But where do ofrendas come from? What's the significance about them? It's an interesting tradition, and
Mm-hmm.
where's it come from?
Well, we have to, like I've mentioned before, we have to remember that much of this whole holiday was conceived, from the Spanish conquistadors bringing over their Christianity and their beliefs to the New World, and meshing with the indigenous Indians of the Aztecs and the Mayans that had, very developed communities at that time, and they obviously, conquered those civilizations. But the meshing of the two cultures, I guess, is, bringing that Catholicism, that Christianity, to All Saints, All Souls Day, remembering the saints in Catholicism, and then remembering the souls of your loved ones, the people in a celebration of life. And so, the Aztecs used to put up what we would say are ofrendas way back then. They were called altars, and sometimes, and if Aztec and Mayan culture, they would give sacrifices to the gods on these altars and all. And so this is kind of where the mesh of that all came together. And I think in modern day Mexico, it's so celebrated there. It's just a given. just like it is a given for some families to go out to the cemeteries and really give reference in celebration of that life of their loved one. Um, so the pecado, the Mexican paper that you will see, the different colors that's what gave it the coloring to these altars. The water is significant to uh, give the spirit water of life, if you will, and they always require like a glass of water on the altar. And then you also have like the pan de muerto that so that they can eat or their favorite foods that they had in their lifetime. And then it's
This
just
is interesting because I didn't know the different components that were part of it. So
yeah, and it's nice, of course, to have their pictures of the loved ones that have deceased, and in some cases, in some families, there are many, like in my family now, because I come from such a large family. But it's also very significant to have the marigold flower because it was the marigold flower in the brilliance of that color and the maybe to lead the spirits to the altars to come home, help them come home. I mean, there's a lot of mysticism, I guess, in the belief of Dia de los Muertos and all. But what's so powerful, I think, is the whole idea that there is that belief of eternal life. That's what's at
yeah,
the core of this. And whether you celebrate it the way they did in the movie Coco, or you have other ways of celebrating it, the main focus of the whole thing is the idea that although we are sad, we're devastated in some cases when we lose a loved one. If you believe in Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, which you believe that there is an eternal life, in whether that's in heaven or whatever your belief is, there is that afterlife that we all, although we have to die in this world, we do go on and reunite in the after world.
yeah, that's another thing that I kind of picked up on in all of my learning about Dia de los Muertos, which isn't extensive, but it's a common theme in Christianity and Catholicism. I'm not Catholic, but I am Lutheran, and it's a common theme. And I think that it's reflected fairly well. It's where Halloween was rooted in. They're
Hmm.
both rooted in similar celebrations, but I think Dia de los Muertos almost does it better than Halloween, and that is laughing at death.
Yes.
Death has lost. It's a celebration of victory, and it's a celebration of the lives that these people have led, and the
Hmm.
fact that they live forever. And it's I think that Dia de los Muertos does a better job of recognizing that aspect of it, that religious connotation,
Hmm.
than Halloween does nowadays. I think this is a conversation that you mentioned Kareem Bowen. Kareem and I had a conversation on this last week about kind of where is religion and Halloween? Where do they line up? Where don't they line up? And we kind of agreed that, well, Halloween doesn't really represent
Traditionally started
what it
as.
started as, and it didn't even how the name Halloween didn't start in that way. All Hallows Eve, I guess.
Yes.
But it I think that it's nice that Dia de los Muertos, even though it is a blend of two things, that Christianity mingling with native cultures, I think that it sticks to that original ideology a lot closer, and a lot more faithfully. Do we see is that religious connotation still there, um, or am I misreading that?
No, I think it is still there. I think it's a big part of it. But that's one of the things that kind of like when you look back at the founders of the Civica, when they said, wow, we're losing our culture, our meaning, that's what they were talking about. And I think that's what me as an elder now, need to teach our young people, that there is a religious connotation about it. And it is just like the quinceañera celebration when a girl turns 15. That's very much rooted in their Christianity and Catholicism. And sometimes they forget about the whole mass or the service leading into the celebration. And so that's just another example of how we have to keep the prayerful part of this celebration a part of it, because as you know, All Saints Day is celebrating the the Catholic faith of the saints that lived righteous lives so many years ago and that are part of the Catholic faith. But All Souls Day is celebrated in the Catholic faith and in Christianity as being, celebrating that life of those that you loved and that had lived, and so, I think it's an important aspect to keep, and you'll see symbols of that as well in the ofrendas, crucifixes, crosses, Our Lady of Guadalupe. They're all part of many, many ofrendas that you see. And so, I think it's a good question, and I think it is something that's very, very important to the celebration in ofrendas.
Yeah, I think that going back to what Kareem and I talked about a while ago, I think what you were talking about with being mindful for other celebrations too. It's not just this one that seems to be kind of losing its meaning, but I think it's important for any culture. And I'm including American culture in there. Even though American is kind of a blend of a lot of things, there is an underpinning there. But I think a lot of our celebrations nowadays are getting kind of hollowed out. We're losing that touch of where things started and why we celebrate to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think that is just as important as having a good time and having fun and celebrating. I think too much focus has been put on the having a good time and celebrating, the candy and the wrapping paper and all that.
And that's so true of Halloween.
Yeah.
Definitely true of Halloween. And it has become very Americanized. And what I mean by that is the fact that, when I was a child in the 70s and the 80s, man, we had some great trick-or-treat times. We would go into whole subdivisions and just hit every house and would have our pillowcases that we put all our candies in. And it was a wonderful time. And if you remember the movie E.T.
Yep.
and you've seen how they celebrate, that's how it really was. And I'm sure it is in some places now. But like I said, I feel like for safety reasons now, parents are sending their kids to trunk or treats rather than to different homes like they used to. But the point is that it's evolved to a different type of Halloween than when I was a kid. And I think that like Dia de los Muertos, you'll see changes as well as it becomes more popular and involves in America. And to bring that awareness, I think it's really important, education wise, as well as just inspiring others to incorporate diversity within their homes. And I know I've told you this story before in regard to when I worked at the Saginaw News, and I'm not trying to put the Saginaw News down by any means, but back in those days, think about this. We're talking 1996, the year I got internet. It was 1996. And I remember going on, I think it was Yahoo at the time. I think it wasn't exist. No, it was American Online. And you would put in the search engine there and a subject, Dia de los Muertos, and there would be nothing. They didn't even know. There was a lot of subjects that weren't put into the internet yet. And that's how new it was and fresh. But I remember working at the Saginaw News and going to my editors and saying, I want to write a story on Dia de los Muertos, a really in-depth story, because, it was something that I had seen and knew in my culture with my mother-in-law now. And I remember my editors saying, no, I couldn't do the story. And I said, why not? That was part of the reason why I was there at the Saginaw News, to bring diversity as a journalist of Mexican descent. There were very few in those days. And so, I really fought for that, and I really wanted to do that. And they said no. And it's funny because, maybe I was before my time or what, I don't know. But now 30 years later, you're seeing a lot of articles, especially on the internet, in regards to Dia de los Muertos, because it's become so popular. So, times are changing, and, that's one of the reasons why it is important to have diversity in the boardrooms, as well as in the organizations, having Hispanics, having Asians, African Americans at the table, because they can bring that perspective, they can bring that diversity, so that it's changes. It's not just how, say, it's traditionally been celebrated, these holidays. And I guess we have to keep in check too, like Cinco de Mayo, so it doesn't get out of hand, where it's only celebrated at the bars with donning sombreros and having margaritas. That's not what Cinco de Mayo is all about, although that has become very popular. So I guess we got to keep things in check sometimes.
Well, and I think part of that is I'm a big proponent of, you can only affect as far as your arm can reach. You have a sphere of influence, and maintaining your beliefs within that sphere, I think, are important. I think it pays to be on the lookout for what's going on around you, but I think it's great that there are many local organizations keeping up traditions of all different cultures, and I think that the Civica is definitely one of those. You said it's the 14th
Yeah.
celebration. That's huge.
Yeah. It would have been the 16th, like I said, but 2 years we didn't do it. But yeah. Yeah. And I remember when we started out, you know, how do we bring attention to it? How do we bring attention to get people here at this brunch or whatever? And, that's why we had a brunch, because we said Mexican food will bring the people in, and it sure did. It always has. And that's why I always say, whenever I throw events, I'm like, man, bring in the tacos, bring in the food, because that will always make an event successful. And that's, part of why we even have the food trucks now, because of the evolution of how the popularity of food trucks today. Last year was the first year we incorporated food trucks at Dia de los Muertos. So this year we're going to have, of course, Mr. Patito Man with the Patitos, and we're going to have T&T Authentic Mexican Restaurant, as well as Cop King. Those are going to be the three there. And we're going to be also serving, some soups, pozole, because it's not supposed to be very warm that day. And as we get colder, like the temperatures really drop today. So not only in some of the promo videos that I've shown for our event, we incorporate the foods as well, because that's a part of the celebration.
Here's a question for you. If it weren't for the food, if someone's coming to this event not for the food, what would you want them to come to any Dia de los Muertos celebration for?
Well, I think to me the religious part is very important. Not so much the religious part, but the Christian idea that there is the eternal life. That in the face of death, we can mock death with these calavera faces and saying, although we die in this world, you cannot defeat us, because we go on and we live this eternal life with, our Savior, Jesus Christ, our Savior. If you're Christian, and so I'd love to explain that to people and get that message out, because I think that's what is at the heart of all of this celebration. Because if you have eternal life, I believe you're also connected to those who are in this life living. And I do feel that I have a psychic ability where I am connected to I could tell you instances where I have experienced presence of those from the other side. And so, I believe wholeheartedly in heaven and the eternal life, and that we go on eternally, with the Lord. And so I think that's what I would really want people to know and come away with, because I'll tell you something. When I lost my mother, Annie, in 2003, it was a really difficult time in dealing with death, because I really hadn't lost anybody significant like that in my life at that time, and that comes with age, sometimes not. But I had a hard time, really mentally with her passing. And then, like I said, I went to Mexico, and I celebrated that. I happened to go, and it wasn't planned, but I happened to go during Dia de los Muertos. And in Morelia, Michoacan, the beautiful Spanish architectural city of Morelia, they celebrate in a big way with the government buildings, the post office, the supermarkets. They've all got ofrendas, and sometimes they'll put, beautiful designs with the marigold flowers on the sidewalks, as you're going into these places. So it was just really beautiful, and I was really touched. And I really reached out to understand the true meaning. And I thought, my God, this is so much healthier, because if you are in a grieving time and you're, someone significant has passed in your life, if you don't have faith and you don't believe, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
And so I know that I came home and I set up an ofrenda for my mom, and it wasn't just during Dia de los Muertos. I actually set it up for months because I was in the grieving process. I put her sunglasses out there. I put a picture of Elvis, because she loved Elvis Presley so much. I mean, it was really a time, and it helped me in the grieving process. And so I think that's another, area where I would really want people to understand and know, because it's such a beautiful tradition culturally, and I feel mentally it's much more healthier to
As
celebrate that way.
Yeah, as you're saying that it's a joyful celebration. That's what Dia de los Muertos is, and I find myself thinking about Halloween and what it's become.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about it a little bit, but what it's become, where it is a celebration based on, not based on, but it is a celebration of fear.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of saying it. It's not a celebration based on fear, but it is celebrating fear
It's become.
and being scared. That's kind of what it's turned into, and it's an interesting contrast between that and the joyful celebration of Dia de los Muertos. And it's fun to be scared sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun. I like horror movies just as much as the next guy and stuff like that. But there's a lot more substance, I think, in thinking about the lives of those who have passed and celebrating their lives. If they're a person of faith, celebrating their faith. My great grandmother's funeral was last Thursday, and when I think about her life, I'm fine. When I think about, man, she lived 98 years and she had all these kids, and she was great, and she had all her faculties up until the end. I'm very pleased. And then when I think about her faith, that's what really gets me and makes me go, oh my gosh, I'm gonna see her again. Kind of like,
yeah.
And I think that's what Dia de los Muertos is celebrating. It is a joyful happiness, not a terror.
Yeah, true, very true. And like there's people that love going to haunted houses and all that, and I remember they were fun and all, and there's a time and place for that, and and that's part of our culture too. But this is totally different. That's where I want to make sure people understand that there is a big difference.
When you mentioned those people who dressed up with the calavera faces for Halloween, at first I thought, man, what's the problem? What's wrong with that? They're having fun.
Yeah.
Larry, I think you're being a stickler. I will say people should celebrate how they want to.
Yeah.
But I think I get it. It has a different connotation, and if you're pulling it from one to the other, it mixes those two up, and maybe those aren't two things you want to mix up.
Yeah. And there's been a post I've seen it go around where it says, "We are a culture, not a costume." And then it shows a calavera face, and I mean, so for some people it's sensitive. I'm not as sensitive, but I think that because like when I see, say in Halloween, and I do see people dressed as a calavera face, it's not so offensive, because I smile, because it's there,
It's still a representation.
It's still around and a representation. And it makes me want to, teach them, make sure that they know the difference, because I think it's okay, but I know that there are those that they will find it very offensive, especially somebody who's maybe more of an immigrant to America. And I'm just speaking off the cuff, but I know that some do find it offensive.
And I'm speaking from an uneducated point of view. I'll say that. But I think that calavera skull imagery, I don't like it. It's not that I'm scared of it or anything. It's just like, it's not for me. But calaveras are cool.
Yeah.
They're appealing.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get the draw in terms of adapting it to celebrate things other than Dia de los Muertos. Do you see the celebration of Dia de los Muertos changing or adapting nowadays, or is it just kind of continuing the traditions but maybe leaving behind some things? What do you see with that?
I do. I think it's leaving behind the idea of this, the prayerful part of it, and how our ancestors, even relatives that I have today, that they celebrate and are prayerful at the cemeteries. That's a big thing at the cemeteries in Mexico. When I was there, I mean, if you look at some of them, the cemeteries themselves become an ofrenda for, what I'm saying? There's flowers all over, and live flowers that are harvested this time. And I mean, it's really a beautiful thing to witness. And I think that part has left us. Maybe because, here in the north it's colder, because I have seen down in Texas where they're still doing that at the cemeteries. But I think that part is kind of left us. And thank God the whole aspect of the ofrenda itself is not left us in, in this area. And I see a lot of people who may not necessarily want to have an ofrenda, say at an organization event like the Dia de los Muertos celebration at Civica, but they have them up in their homes, and that's really beautiful too, because it's teaching their young people, you know, the concept and of Dia de los Muertos for them as well.
And I think having, when you're talking about preserving a culture, preserving traditions, having that around is so big, especially for when you're talking young kids. They copy everything they do is just copying what's around them and building the, this is what we are, this is what we do, this is how we celebrate, even on a day-to-day basis, if not for a yearly tradition. I think it's a big thing, and I think it's great to see continue.
Yes, yes, indeed. So everybody, come on out Saturday, November the 4th. We're going to be at the Union Cívica Mexicana, and we're going to be celebrating the 14th annual Dia de los Muertos celebration. And we invite the greater community as well. It's not just for Hispanics, it's for everybody to bring that awareness of this Mexican holiday to the masses. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in again to another edition of Mi Gente on Air. I can't believe how fast this went. But it's always a pleasure to be with you here on Mi Gente on Air. Hasta luego, everybody. See you next week. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today on a subject that is dear to my heart, Dia de los Muertos. I got a really beautiful message yesterday from Lourdes Espinosa in regards to this celebration. I know that her late niece Gloria Munoz used to put up ofrendas for our Dia de los Muertos celebration. And Lourdes said, that, she gave credit to the Civica for bringing this awareness to our area in a big way. For the last 15 years, 14 years. And it's really nice that Disney did the movie Coco. Now you got to realize Coco sometimes gets hit by some people who didn't like how they incorporated some parts of the movie. But I thought it was done wonderful. I thought it was a beautiful story. I connected to it wholeheartedly, and I remember sitting in the theater, and I had nieces and nephews and younger people with me. The queen of the Civic at the time, she was 18, and her friend, and we were all sitting there. And I know that they were all engrossed in this movie, and they were touched wholeheartedly like I was. And me being the adult and male and not wanting to cry in front of them, there were so many parts in the movie I wanted to cry, and I didn't. I held it very strongly, the machismo part of me, I guess. And then the end of the movie, the lights came on, and a big tear came down my face. It was just one tear, and they all looked at me and they said, "Oh my God, Larry's crying," But it was so touching, and I got to say, Disney brought an awareness like nobody can like Disney. And so from that point on, I've seen a real shift in regards to the popularity of Dia de los Muertos. So that awareness that they brought, as well as hopefully like shows like Mi Gente on Air, we can bring that awareness of our culture and heritage to the masses. So that's all I got to say tonight. So thank you for being with me. Jonathan, is there anything else you want to go out with?
No, I think you wrapped it up pretty well.
All right, everybody. Thanks again. I didn't get to read anybody's comments. There were a lot, but I talk too much sometimes. So we'll see you again next week here on Mi Gente.